proximity to Oblivion didn't seem to harm us at all. In many ways, I think it just drew attention to quality RPGs on that week, and everybody was thinking and talking about the genre.
55% of people who played Expedition 33 on Xbox also played Oblivion.
Hello and welcome to The Game Business, your weekly guide to what's going on in the video game business. I am not Christopher Dring. I am James Batchelor, the ghost of podcast past, and I will be your host this week. I was originally going to be guest, but I never could get a word in edgeways with Chris, so I'm taking over hosting duties to guarantee that I do have at least some words to say.
This is weird.
Chris, you now say words.
Hello. Hello, James.
Hello. How you been?
It's lovely. So for the people who are new to, who may not know this, before The Game Business, James Batchelor and I worked at gamesindustry.biz, and we had a weekly microcast called the gamesindustry.biz microcast. So this is a reunion of sorts, a return to... James, you're at Digital Banditos now.
I am. I'm now at Digital Banditos. We are an up-and-coming indie publisher. We were formed by Steve Escalante and Lance James, who obviously are best known for Versus Evil. And yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. As so many people have said, I'm now on the dark side.
Yes.
I'm communications manager, which is technically PR, but I also get to play the games and discuss what we might and might not sign. And I'm not going to do that. I used to hate as a journalist. It's still weird to me. It's only like 4 or 5 months on, but I keep on saying as a journalist, like it's something I haven't done for ages. But I hated it as a journalist when you talk to people and they're like, oh, I can't really tell you what we're working on. I genuinely can't tell you what we're working on.
Well, obviously you've come back to join me. So I'm delighted that Digital Banditos has let you go on shore leave to return to hosting. But obviously you are a natural. You hosted the microcast, so I feel like I should step back a bit and let you do what's natural.
It did feel a bit weird coming on where you introduce like the news and stuff, and then I have to think of something to say. I'm more comfortable doing it this way around.
Well, I'm enjoying doing The Game Business. In fact, my big focus at the moment is we're doing a live event. It's actually listeners as well and viewers. We're doing a live version of The Game Business show. It's called The Game Business Live. We're doing it at Summer Game Fest on June 9th on the Monday. We haven't put tickets on sale yet. We're still wrangling over those last few speakers. But that's been my I've had a really wonderful first month. I was quite excited. I think that was last week's show. We talked about the month. And now I'm like, right, what's next? And what's next is this live show. So if anyone's in LA on June 9th and want to come see us do this live, imminently we'll be making an announcement and putting some tickets available and stuff like that. So that's what I've been up to the last week. But obviously with this show, the news show that we do on the Thursday is a bit like the old microcast where we chat about the news.
It is, and we have got tons to get through. So big topic for the week is Clair Obscur Expedition 33. We're going to be talking about the success of that game, but we also have another former gamesindustry.biz editor in the form of Matt Handrahan. He's going to be joining us later. I say joining us, I mean joining you, but I'm host. I get to take credit for some of it. Before that, we've got a few other stories from around the industry. First of all, Ziff Davis, former stomping ground for the pair of us, owner of IGN, Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, VG247, Games.biz, and a ton of other media sites that aren't in the game industry. The company is currently suing OpenAI for copyright infringement. So according to the report on GamesBeat, the lawsuit claims that OpenAI has knowingly copied the text of Ziff Davis' site without authorization and violated its written demands to stop. And if I remember rightly, I've read about a year's worth of ongoing demands and requests and so forth, and they've just ignored all of it. The lawsuit also says that OpenAI stripped out copyright management information from Ziff Davis' works, and then it alleges that OpenAI passes this work off as its own. The lawsuit claims that OpenAI also falsely attributes output to Ziff Davis that is not Ziff Davis content. Right. I will add there's a nice breakdown of this if you sign up to Tommy Thompson's AI and Games newsletter. I was reading that before we started. This is just one of many, many lawsuits against OpenAI and the use of generative AI scraping people's content. But thoughts on the fact that it's Ziff Davis specifically, you kind of a games media powerhouse?
Yeah, certainly journalists are quite pleased that they are taking this stance. The other stance they could take is signing a deal with them so that, they are, able to access all of their stuff. I mean, this is the big concern around. We've talked about AI in the past, you and I, James, and I over Christmas, my sort of a distant cousin of mine, I was at his house and he was there, and he showed me a game he'd been making, and he's about 12. he's a programmer, he does a bit of programming, he's programmed a game. But I couldn't believe that, it looks like a game. And then he told me, he had a logo for his studio, which is just him. And all of it's AI, all of it's generated via AI. The logo, the assets in the game, everything. He's just, and then when he needs to do something else, he just asks AI. And I couldn't work out whether or not this was exciting or awful. I couldn't, it is obviously great that he's able to he's not putting out a game, but he's able to build a prototype for a game that looks like a game and plays like a game. And he doesn't need all of the skill set to do it. He doesn't need to have a team of people to do it. He's able to experiment and try things. It's wonderful. But then I did also think, I look at the music industry, which is now becoming increasingly singular and individual. And I think that's a bit of a shame. But the big concern is what Ziff Davis is sort of fighting is, where is this stuff coming from? Mm-hmm. What are they doing to build it? We've got a games media special coming up. We spoke to a few media people. And one of the big concerns is how easy it is to just take someone else's review, stick it into an AI machine and go, rewrite this. And, you've already got websites that steal entire articles from people. And then they have to fight to get that taken down. And now you've got an ability to, people can steal entire articles, rewrite it using AI. And how will you even spot that stuff? It is unsettling, because what's going to happen if you lose all of that? If you lose the original material, if the original material can't make money or can't be successful, what does AI base its?
Yeah. It's so many different aspects of, like, looking specifically at this lawsuit. So like I said, I was reading the AI and games kind of write-up of it, and the examples they gave were astonishing. So like one example was guides content, because obviously people searched online for answers to game stuff, and it's already bad enough you've got the Google AI overview, which instantly gives you the answer before it shows you any actual search results. By way of example, in this lawsuit, Ziff Davis had said, right, okay, ChatGPT, write me a summary of this guide from Eurogamer, a one-sentence summary. And it just copy-pasted the answer. Not copy-pasted, but it rearranged the article. But there were little quirks and that kind of Eurogamer humor in the original article, and that was in the ChatGPT output. And so that's bad enough, like blatant copying. But the point in the lawsuit, one of the points in the lawsuit, was that AI can completely mislead people. They gave the example of, right, okay, ChatGPT, do me a summary or rewrite of this article about Red Dead Redemption 2 money cheats. And they shared a screenshot, like there's a table on Eurogamer of these are the things you need to type in to get money in Red Dead Redemption 2. And the GPT output was, there are no money cheats in Red Dead Redemption 2. It is not possible to. It's like, that's a blatant lie based on the source material you have been specifically directed to, reference. It's ridiculous. Last example I've given, it's not from the Ziff Davis lawsuit, but it's something I saw doing the rounds on social media recently. There's a former Washington Post reporter, Gillian Brockle. She left in 2023, and she said, when she left, there were concerns about how AI is going to be used and so forth. Washington Post is one of the sites that has actually done a partnership with OpenAI to allow it to scrape it, so forth. And you can now ask ChatGPT to write an article in the style of Gillian Brockle, and it will produce an article, but it will even say by Gillian Brockle. Now, obviously, this is just in GPT. This is not published to Washington Post, but it does show, that ChatGPT shouldn't be assigning the name, giving it, a byline of an author that did not write it, and in fact, their work was scraped in order to produce there's so many aspects to it. We could probably spend a whole hour talking about this.
Yeah, it's a complicated question as well, because, there's an element of AI as a tool, which a lot of people talk about. And the idea of AI making things easier and making things more accessible to people. But the idea of just stealing stuff, I think, is a different thing. And it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I guess we'll I'm always wary of saying it'll be interesting. I think we're all a little anxious around it. And Stephen Tortillo actually decided to investigate that money cheat thing of GTA. I started asking more and more questions of ChatGPT, and he found out that ChatGPT or OpenAI did actually have an answer that involved that cheat code, but they decided it wasn't a legal cheat code. And that's why it said there was no cheat code. My thing is, I will go into Google and I will go, I'm doing a piece on numbers, and I'll go, how many copies did this game sell? And the first thing that'll pop up is a Google AI thing. And by the way, Google AI thing is so often wrong, it annoys me that it dominates half my screen. And it'll say to me, this game has sold 3 million copies in 5 days. Well, the game came out 2 years ago. So has it done since then? And maybe they've not released any more information. Maybe that's why Google AI's system has decided to tell me that number. And I'll go on Wikipedia or go and look, and I look and I find the links and go, no, there is a more up-to-date number. But I guess it's scraping the whole internet and it's getting the most commonly used answer. And which might be, by the time they've got down to 20 million sales, it's not being picked up so much. Earlier today, and this is a segue opportunity, by the way, I decided to Google when is Borderlands 4 coming out. And I got September 23rd was what the Google put up right in front of me. And of course, 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago, by the time this podcast goes out, that date changed. But I imagine when they're scraping the internet for the answer, more people had put the original date than they have got the other date. And so it's just not reliable at this point in time anyway. But it's one of the reasons I've gone down this route, podcasts and video. It's not actually one of the reasons, but one of the benefits, I guess, of podcasts and video and having sort of more personable newsletters and stuff like that is it's not something that can just be copied and told by a machine. But yeah, it's Ziff Davis going after them. I think there'll be a few journalists that see them as the good guys in this story. And we'll see how this battle plays out, because I think there does need to be some form of regulation and control, because it does feel mad that they can just take people's work and take people's identity. It's just, their profession.
As I say, there are so many lawsuits against OpenAI. So I think it's going to be a long time before we see the results from the Ziff Davis one and then all of the others. But together, they should hopefully create some sort of precedent that stops this from happening.
If it's not too late.
Funny you mentioned Borderlands 4, because yes, that is indeed our next story. Borderlands 4, as you mentioned, has been brought forward. The release has been brought forward almost 2 weeks, from September 23rd to September 12th. Now, naturally, nothing is simple on the internet. Nothing can just be, well, that happened. Speculation is rife that this is giving us a hint as to when Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, because obviously Borderlands is published by 2K, which is owned by Take-Two, which also owns Rockstar, which also makes Grand Theft Auto. So it's all within the same house. I mean, we've talked in the past on previous podcasts about how nuts 2K's lineup is this year, or Take-Two's lineup is this year, with Civ 7, Borderlands 4, Mafia: The Old Country, and Grand Theft Auto 6.
On top of their WWE and NBA and all of those sort of usuals.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe even Judas, maybe even the Ken Levine game.
No. They can't. Surely not. Surely not. That would be just, they'd have nothing. They don't. I was going to say they'd have nothing to release next year, but they don't need to release anything for the next 5 years, because they'll have GTA 6.
Next 12 years.
It's 12 years. You're right. And regardless, so people are, I think, they've moved Borderlands earlier, because now people are speculating the GTA 6 will come out either late September or early October, which does feel roughly when it might arrive anyway. Borderlands boss Randy Pitchford has taken to X to deny all of this. He wrote in a tweet/post, Borderlands 4 shipping early is 100% the result of confidence in the game and development trajectory backed by actual tasks and bug find fix rates. Our decision is literally 0% about any other product's actual or theoretical launch date. Now, you can choose whether or not to believe him, and most of the internet has. I don't know. I struggle to think of an example of a AAA game where, particularly in the last couple of years, where they've brought the release forward.
I'm sure Randy's telling the truth in some way that's true to him.
Yes.
I certainly wouldn't suggest otherwise, but
I'm not doubting the confidence in the game.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the game's ready, right? So that's great. I guess the thing that I've got with it is, if you're in marketing, if you're in PR, you've just put out a press release announcing a release date. Even Google will tell you that the release date is the 23rd of September. All the marketing assets you've put out, all the promotion you've done for the game, go on any of the storefronts, and that's the release date for the game. People have put it in their calendars and plans, and then you decide to move the date. Moving the date is no small thing. Mm. And so you would expect there to be a reason. We moved it because the game will be ready sooner. Why not leave it where it is? have a nice holiday before you release it.
Yeah.
Just to spend, have a nice relaxed week before launch. Who gets one of those? So I have to believe it is something to do with the slate. Is it because of GTA 6? It could be, but I think it's more likely to do with the fact that actually, when Borderlands 4 announced its date, it was the only game in that window, and now Marathon, Bungie's next game, is out the same week as Borderlands 4. It's the same day actually. Well, it was. going to be the same day. I think about a week later, Ghost of Yotai, another PlayStation game, is also due out. Okay, these are different experiences, different games, but there is crossover to those audiences. They're going to be taking up space on the PlayStation Store. Borderlands 4 is a big PlayStation game. PlayStation's backed it. So you suddenly got like this...
Late September is usually
FIFA.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sports FC. The way I worked it out was you have a week where it's Marathon and Borderlands 4, then it was going to be EA Sports FC, and then immediately the week after it's Ghost of Yotai. And Ghost of Yotai, I know that perhaps I know it came at the end of Ghost of Tsushima, launched at the end of the PS4 generation, so perhaps it didn't get picked up. People didn't know how successful that game was. It did 13 million copies, and mostly on one platform. So you've got that PlayStation, it's a big title for PlayStation. Borderlands is a big title for PlayStation. So I wouldn't be surprised. It doesn't have to be because of GTA. It could just be, it's got a bit congested. Why not release our game a couple of weeks earlier? It will be ready. Let's do it. And I completely agree with that. The idea that there's 0% to do with any other game, I'm like, I think it probably is because it's a clearer window. Borderlands 4 is obviously massive. You're a massive Borderlands fan, or James, or a big one anyway. It's obviously a huge title. It's a significant title. And I think it's good for fans to move your game into a slot where they have a bit more time to play. And we've seen other game developers move their games forward or later, all that kind of stuff to accommodate titles, not just because they want a better cut through, but because their audience might want to play both things and they want to give their audience the opportunity to do that. And I think, so it could be because of GTA, but it could be because for many other reasons. I don't necessarily follow the idea from Randy that it's literally 0% about any other product, actual or theoretical launch date. Maybe not an individual product, maybe just general busy period.
I think if you just removed that second sentence from his statement, you'd be fine. It's the 0% thing there.
Or maybe from his point of view, it's 0%, but from 2K that would rubber stamp the date move, it might have had a lot more to do with it. Yeah.
You're right. It makes sense to give it a bit more room to breathe. Like the Borderlands games are huge, like in terms of, both in terms of popularity, but also in terms of, particularly since 3 was a massive hit for them.
Yeah.
But also in terms of content, like they are not games that you just blitz through in like a week or two. Like they do, they require a lot of time put into them. The player base do like pouring a lot of time. There's a lot of anticipation for this one. We saw this when everyone was decrying the movie last year and instead demanding when the next Borderlands game is. So, yeah, I'm intrigued to see how well this one does. I mean, I'm still intrigued to see when GTA 6 does land, regardless of whether or not it's had a direct impact on this one.
I think we'll know soon. Take-Two's financials is May 15th. I'm not saying they'll announce it then, but they might announce it around then because I think there will be an expectation to it. But here's the thing, like, this is Rockstar. And we know what Take-Two are like. Take-Two very much put it on their developers and that kind of stuff. And of course, they'll know a rough window of when it's due out. But Rockstar will tell Take-Two when it's ready, or take the window. We'll have it out for that date. It won't be put on them by Take-Two. By the time May 15th rolls around, if Rockstar haven't given them a date, then they won't have a date. We've seen it before. I've heard stories before from other publishers who were in their financials going, yep, the game will come out this year. And then 2 months later or 2 weeks later, the developer turns around and goes, actually, no, it's not going to be ready for then. And then they're having to then go back to their shareholders and and say, sorry, that's going to miss this window now. It's like, well, why didn't you know it 2 weeks ago? The developer hadn't told them. And, certain companies are set up that way. I Take-Two certainly one of them. They very much, empower their Rockstar to be Rockstar and 2K to be 2K and all those sort of things. So it might be that, Take-Two don't know exactly. But it's certainly, I love how... if you read the internet is so rife with it, Strauss Zelnick does an interview with like a financial press and he says a different phrase than he normally says when he talks about release. And everyone's like, I don't mean it's being delayed or it's being pushed earlier. Or
I have no doubt there are GTA 6 fans like at home with like a massive whiteboard, bits of string drawn out to like printouts of every tweet.
Future Publishing have a podcast called GTA 6 O'Clock, which I think is running up to 60 episodes now. There's only one trailer.
It will never happen. Imagine if they shadow dropped it.
Oh,
it will never happen, but just...
Okay, it wouldn't happen because it's such a possibly big physical retail release, so it's very hard to manage that.
You can't shadow drop a retail game, no.
But if it was like a PC game, I completely believe like a Valve could drop Half-Life 3.
Oh, yeah.
Just suddenly and unexpectedly. That's the sort of thing that if it's a digital-only platform, you could... I can actually see that. And GTA could get away with it.
Half-Life 3 is ready. They're just sitting on it, waiting for the most disruptive time.
Yeah. Launch it on the same day as GTA 6. Yeah.
Release day, yeah, exactly. The day it comes out, it's like, Half-Life 3. No. Okay, we're getting into the realms of fantasy here. So,
well, yeah, but it's interesting because obviously I think I didn't realize how busy it's been the last couple of weeks. I was talking, I know we'll come on to this subject, but Expedition 33 coming out the same week as Oblivion, and then someone pointed out to me that Indiana Jones came out only on PlayStation 5 only the week before, and it done pretty well. I think it was the best-selling game on PlayStation that week. I think better than it did on Xbox in terms of sales. Obviously, it was a Game Pass title, so that was quite a significant thing. And then Bethesda drop another game the week later, which is also owned by Microsoft and all Xbox games. And then Doom's out in a couple of weeks. I sit there and go, the release date. My head. You know what my head's like, James. So I do this when Mario Kart. You won't be surprised by this. When Mario Kart World was announced, can you work out what may have been going through my head when I saw that announcement?
How much this is going to affect the Sonic racing game?
Yeah, yes. So about 3 weeks before the Mario Kart World, not even World, it was just a teaser for Mario Kart in January. My brain went, this poor Sonic game.
I tell you what, I've been hanging out with you too much, because that thought did occur to me very briefly when I was watching the Mario Kart trailer as well.
But I said poor, then I went, but actually it's on different platforms. If you wanted a Mario Kart game but you don't have the Switch 2, you can't get a Switch 2, maybe Sonic could be the alternative. And look, they're not actually coming out at the same time. But of course, then my brain went to, in 2018, or 2019, when the last Sonic game came out, it came out next to Crash Team Racing. And it was like, that wasn't a great moment for it. And then, so my brain, I don't get excited initially about a game. My immediate thought impact is, what does that mean? When Marathon was announced the same time as Borderlands 4, I was like, that's a tricky window. And that is just, it's been doing this job for too long. And I had the same thing with Bethesda's slate, where it went from Indiana Jones to Oblivion to Doom in about 4 weeks. It's I felt for the PR team.
It's so different. I really enjoyed the conversation you were talking about on a previous podcast. But my thought when they shadow dropped Oblivion was Avowed, because Avowed has only been out a couple of months, and
I wondered if that's the reason why it got shadow dropped.
I do wonder that,
in the sense that if you had the PR campaigns running side by side, that would have been a problem. But Avowed at least had a good 2 months.
Yeah, because people would have held off trying Avowed because they know Oblivion's coming. That's entirely possible. But yeah. Shall we move on to our main topic?
Yes.
So the main topic is, as we mentioned earlier, RPG Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Huge breakout hit for Kepler Interactive and the developer Sandfall Interactive. The game has sold more than 1 million units in just 3 days, and that is actual sales, not players, which is a rarity in this day and age, an actual sales statistic. Players will obviously be higher because the game is also available on Xbox Game Pass. Those numbers are not included. Not sure if those numbers will be released. Chris, I understand you've been looking into kind of the game and the performance. I know what you're like with your data, so I assume you have stats for us.
I do have some stats for you, but I think before actually I'll share some numbers. I actually managed to catch up with Kepler just earlier today, and I spoke to Senior Portfolio Manager Matt Handrahan. Is a name that might ring a bell to you, James.
Vague memory of him.
The former editor-chief of GamesIndustry.biz. Is very much a reunion show, this one. So, shall we hear from Matt?
Let's.
Hello, Matt. Welcome to the show. It's nice to bring you back into the business media for a brief moment.
Yeah, kicking and screaming back into the trade press. But yes, thank you very much for having me, Chris. Good to see you again.
Well, congratulations on the success of Expedition 33. I never know which half of the name do I use.
For a while internally, I think we would only call it Expedition 33. But I think it's a long name in the tradition of Japanese RPGs, I suppose. But yeah, I default to Expedition 33, of course, full name. Clair Obscur Expedition 33.
Well, I was a little worried when Oblivion dropped just before you, but you seem to have done exceptionally well.
Yeah.
You must be feeling great. I mean, how has it matched your expectations?
I think it's fair to say it's exceeded our expectations. I think we all expected it to do well. There are certain markers you can look at that we track success by, things like Steam wish lists, pre-orders, just general sentiment online. I don't think there was a time we showed this game where we didn't get a nice bump in those wish list and pre-order numbers. And also there was no time we showed it where there wasn't obviously a lot of positive sentiment around it, around the kind of game it is, around what it seemed to be trying to do in the industry, which I think is quite an interesting thing. I think it just resonated with people on many different levels. But I mean, to be in a position where we can say with some confidence we might have, at this moment, one of the most popular games in the world, is actually a pretty mind-blowing thing. We see ourselves as AA, and that is a very vaguely defined space, but it is really heartening to be able to be to launch at the same time as a product, an IP of the size of something like Elder Scrolls Oblivion, and go toe to toe with it, and then come out in the position that we're in. So yeah, it's couldn't have gone better, honestly. But yeah, it's been happy times at Kepler and at Samfall the last couple of weeks.
Because you know how my brain works from the business journalist point of view. I don't always go, oh, exciting, a new Oblivion game. I go, oh, goodness, the Expedition's out this week. You know, when Mario Kart was announced, my brain went, there's a Sonic racing game announced a week ago. You know?
Yes, indeed. I think we always knew that Expedition 33 had a very specific identity as a game, as a gameplay experience. And personally, as a player, you know, I when I was in the press, I always saw kind of the Western style RPG and the Japanese style RPG as having quite different appeals and different audiences. I knew plenty of people that would play an Elder Scrolls game that wouldn't necessarily play Final Fantasy, and vice versa. I think also by the time that week rolled around, we had momentum of our own, and we felt pretty confident that we could stand alone beside it. I think there were other aspects of that, like the price point we were at, various other things, inclusion in Game Pass. So we knew we would have a lot of interest around the game. We were confident in that. And like I say, it went as well as it possibly could have done in our eyes. And actually proximity to Oblivion didn't seem to harm us at all. In many ways, like I think it just drew attention to quality RPGs on that week, and everybody was thinking and talking about the genre. And I think you've seen that in the way the game has continued to hold people's attention since then. So we're very pleased.
You certainly have to have momentum. It seems to be getting bigger and bigger, which I guess is normal for a new IP. You got that first group of people, and then that spreads amongst communities, media, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, I think with Expedition, that visually it's such an amazing looking game. Samfall's art team are masters, genius level. Character design, I've always thought that since the very first time I'd seen the game. So it shows very well in trailers, it shows very well in showcases. But I think once you get in there, you realize that the quality of the storytelling is very, very high. The battle system is extremely good, like one of the best of its kind, in its class, I think. So once you get in there, I think there's lots more surprises to be had beyond the way the game looks and the atmosphere. The music is obviously great. It's just an extremely well-made game on many different levels, and in a style of game that hasn't really existed in this way in quite a long time now. Like I think it's a kind of game that there were more of 15 years ago, maybe. But the AAA companies kind of moved away from that in many respects. And this game is a modernization of that style of JRPG. And I think there were people just waiting to receive one. And that is what's got us to where we are.
To talk us through Kepler's journey with the game, what was it like when you first saw it? Talk us through that sort of story.
Well, I think when the game first came to our attention, it was in prototype form. It was an early version of the game. It wasn't like we could see the potential of the concept of the idea, but I think the form it was in at that point in time wasn't quite fleshed out enough. I think with a game like this, with this sort of tactical battle system, you need to see that side of it is working. You want to know the world is going to hit in the right way. If you look at a series like Final Fantasy, a series like Persona, these are IPs that have inspired the Samfall team that they kind of grew up playing. I think you want those sides of the game to really come through. We need to have confidence that they could do that. We knew it wasn't very far away. I know that my CEO, Alexi Garavarian, had the most contact with them at this time. He saw the potential in it, but thought there was still some parts of it that needed a little bit more work. So Samfall went away, they did that work, and they came back. And on the second time of seeing it, our response was extremely, extremely quick. I think one of our executives received an email from a person at a different publisher who I won't name, saying that by the time they'd even started looking at Expedition 33, Kepler had already signed it, because as soon as they got the confirmation the team had it, we were straight on top of it.
Oh, wow.
But that's like a big part of it. You know, if you find a game you like, if you find a game that excites you, you really have to act quickly, because I think the truly special games, there aren't that many of them out there. There's a lot of games and a lot of good games, but the really remarkable stuff comes along relatively rarely. So when you find one, you need to make sure it can be yours. So I think that first time we saw it, maybe not quite there, but the second we got that reassurance, we leapt on the opportunity.
Just kudos to the team then to, get that feedback, and whatever that feedback was, I'm assuming that you gave it, and then going away and immediately putting that into place.
Well, I think it was less our specific feedback. It was more just making sure that the direction we thought they were headed was the direction they were headed, and that was just the confirmation. Like I say, what the game is is so clear, and it was so clear even at that early stage.
Really?
It was just fleshing out a little bit more, nailing down the style of it a little bit more. And as soon as we got those confirmations, we signed.
Great. I'll end on talking about the fact, because when I saw the game for the first time, it was the Xbox showcase. And it was one of the most packed Xbox showcases I've ever seen, Doom and Gears of War and that kind of stuff. And then this game really shone out. Like this isn't my style of game, but I went, oh, that's different.
Yep.
And it clearly resonated, and I wasn't the only one that felt that way. And then Xbox featured it. Was it in the Developer Direct earlier in the year?
Developer Direct in January, yeah.
Normally reserved for first-party games. So it feels like you had a lot of support from the Xbox side that really helped you. And then, of course, it's in Game Pass as well. What role did they play helping this game break through?
The more obvious way is what you mentioned, right? That showcase inclusion. I think a lot of indie-level publishers and AA publishers, they rely on things like Steam Next Fest to a large degree to get eyes on their game. I think partnering with the platform gives you a few more venues to kind of showcase what you're doing and to update people on it. So we got a couple of like really big places to do that from Xbox, as you said, the Summer Showcase last year, the Developer Direct this year. The other benefit of that you hinted at before, which is that our game was placed alongside Gears of War and Fable and products that are very traditionally and known as AAA products, which I think actually changed the view of what our product was. Even though it hadn't been seen very many times, it allowed it to be seen in a context that let people understand what it was in a way that I think we would have struggled to do if we weren't allied with Xbox in that way, because it puts us in a context that we couldn't replicate easily ourselves, that we couldn't have done through a Steam demo alone, for example. So I think that really helped us to kind of claim this AA territory in a much more confident way, because like I say, it's a vague space that exists somewhere between small games and extremely big games, and there's a lot of ground that covers. But I think having the backing of a platform like Xbox gives you the ability to position your game in front of players in a way that you really can't replicate otherwise.
And what about the Game Pass element? Did that, I guess, that part of that as well?
Well, I think it's definitely a part of it. I think when you're in Game Pass, you're going to have access to a large group of players on launch day, which is a great thing. And I think one of the things that's really helped Expedition 33 is the number of people who are engaging with it right on launch day and continue to do so now. There's a lot of enthusiasm online about this game. I mean, I remember I had to transition from specifically looking for Expedition 33 on Twitter to see what people were saying about it to now, if I just open Twitter, I'm just going to see Expedition 33 content because there are that many people out there enthusing about it. We've had Ken Levine talking about how much the opening of the game affected him. We've had words of congratulations from Obsidian and other studios. And I know this means the world to Samful. And as someone who has been in publishing for a few years, but hasn't seen that many launches of this size, I mean, it's pretty overwhelming for me too. I think Game Pass helps with just getting that swell of interest in the game. We've done well on every platform, but that I think is the other benefit of Game Pass.
I got some press engine numbers, I think, in the last couple of weeks, something like over 4,000 articles on Expedition 33 with a potential audience of 1 billion people or something like that.
Yeah, it is. They are figures that kind of blow the mind, but I think it's a game that justifies them fully. You can see it from the Metacritic score. You can see it from the user reviews. It is a game that I think has highlighted there is room in the market for like a new IP from a reasonable sized team, not tiny, but definitely nowhere near a AAA team at all, working in a way that was much more common once upon a time, but bringing much more modern techniques, modern presentation to it, and just presenting something fresh. It's not a 150-hour game. It's not an $80 game. This is exactly what I think the kind of game that we want Kepler to be putting out there, and it's gone as well as we could have dared hoped.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good talking to you.
There he is. Matt Handrahan back in the trade media with me and James. He talked about in that video, he talked about the fact that it is a game that was a little bit of a hark back to the sort of games like the Final Fantasy X of the world that people played a few years ago, and you don't get to see as much anymore. And it reminded me of what happened with Space Marine 2, which was a similar successful concept. And in fact, we've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, these ideas of games that they're not necessarily original. They are original in their own way, but they're not. Sometimes it's just going back to an experience people haven't had for a while and then delivering that and really focus and doing an extremely good job on that combat system, on that art style, really nailing that and getting that right, and then watching that spread out. It's a really phenomenal success. It's been really wonderful. despite its launch window. Have you a chance to see it, James, or play it?
I haven't had a chance to play it yet, no, but like the fact that it's on Game Pass is kind of on my list of ones to try. This is what I love when you see these kind of big indie success stories. Like it gives you a little bit of FOMO. It does give you encouragement. Like JRPGs are not my thing. I have tried to get into them and I struggle with them. But when I see a game performing this well, it's like I do need to at least give it a go and see what the secret sauce is. So it's on my list to try out. It's brilliant. Like it's really encouraging to see it happening. It shows that that indie publishers or smaller publishers like can have those big, huge hits. They're not common. They're very difficult. As he says, like it's really difficult to find like the special games out there, the ones that are the most likely to kind of reach that size of audience. But it can happen. Like I think the indie space can. And I say this both from my first couple of months in the indie space, but also like from being a journalist and like seeing, and how difficult it is to try and get indie games coverage and so forth. It can seem quite bleak in the indie space. And yes, seeing a game like Clair Obscur do so well does not instantly mean that all other JRPG, indie JRPGs are going to do well. No. But it showed if you do have like the right kind of idea, the right quality, you find something that finding something that an audience is not being served, scratching an itch that is not being scratched, as it were, there's a chance.
Oddly, I find the reference this being an indie game or even a AA game, I think misleading.
I know, it's hilarious. Yeah.
It's because it's like, it's like, I think we are getting to the point where actually those labels really are, if they weren't meaningless already, really are. Because, sure, it's a 33-person team. It's indie in every sense of the word, but it doesn't look indie. And an indie creates a certain perception. And just because a game is focused and short, does that make it less AAA? Like, Spider-Man 2 is 20 hours long. We wouldn't call that an indie game or a AA game. I find this, Resident Evil 4's 8 hours long. It wouldn't call that a AA game.
The quite literal indie game, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, you can do that in about 15 hours. And that's fine. That's exactly what it needs to be.
You drop Indiana Jones in it. So yeah, it is, but it's, I wouldn't call Space Marine 2 an indie game. I wouldn't even call it a AA game. It's AAA-ish, I think. I don't know if we need to label them.
No, this is true. And this is the thing, like, regardless of your budget, your team size, etc., your game needs to be as polished as it possibly can. I'm going to tick a box in your internal batch bingo here. I'm going to refer to indie publishing in terms of books and novels and fiction and so forth. Like the resounding advice in that space is always your book needs to look and read as professional as one that's come from the big publishers. So it needs to have a professional cover, not one you've made in MS Paint or used a generative AI image generator on it. Your writing needs to be tight and well edited. It needs to be proofread to within an inch of its life. Because if you produce a quality product and the audience can't tell what's the difference between an indie book and a main publishing book, it doesn't matter. You have a chance of succeeding. I think it's the same in the indie game space. Like that emphasis on quality and polish, and that doesn't mean it needs to be like super Unreal Engine 5, all glamour, ray tracing puddles and all this. It just means it needs to be a very good quality game.
And Matt talked about, the fact that it was announced alongside Fable and Gears of War and all that kind of stuff. Probably gave that impression, as he said. It sort of gave the impression that this is perhaps, quite an ambitious game.
Great. I gather you mentioned earlier you have done some research into how well the game has performed. And so I get to ask you something I've not asked you in a good few months. What do the numbers mean?
I don't know if game business listeners will understand that reference. We used to have a section where we went through the numbers, and it was called What Do the Numbers Mean? So I actually spoke a little bit. You may have seen I referenced something in the interview with Matt where I talked about Press Engine. So Press Engine, the PR services company, provided me with a load of data around Expedition 33. And what I thought I'd do is I'd do Expedition 33 versus Oblivion, because there was this thing where Oblivion launched in the same week. It's really weird, but there would have been a reason for it. I just don't know what that reason is. And so during the week, so in the 2 weeks around the launch of these games, Elder Scrolls Oblivion scored 5,000 articles, just over 5,004 articles over a 2 week period. Expedition 33 scored 4,235, which I think is really impressive when you consider that this one's a new IP and one's an established brand. Obviously, Expedition 33 would have got reviews and stuff like that, whereas Oblivion not so much. Also, Oblivion, by the way, has been out for longer. I know Expedition 33 had been announced for longer. But here's the thing, in terms of audience, and the audience is like the unique, it's basically unique readers, of these articles. Elder Scrolls Oblivion has scored 952.8 million readers or of those articles. And Expedition 33 has done 1 billion. So more people have read Expedition 33 articles. In fact, I asked the press engine, okay, how many Expedition 33 articles have been written since the game was shown during the Xbox showcase? And the answer is 9,908, which means that, 40% maybe, probably more than 40% of Expedition 33 coverage has come in the last couple of weeks. Again, not surprising, the game's just come out, but it's certainly done very well in the last couple of weeks. It's building in momentum. It's growing in its success. I asked Ampere, so our data partner Ampere, to give us some insight into player numbers. Because that's the thing. We've got this weird number from Oblivion, which is it's not weird, but it's 4 million players. And you've got this 1 million sales from Expedition 33. So what is the actual performance of these games in player terms? That's what Ampere track. So I asked Ampere, this data covers the top European markets, so UK, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, those sort of markets, Australia, because I just like Australia, and the US and Canada. It doesn't include Japan or China. And actually, I think Expedition 33 has done pretty well in China. But this day, and I'll say it is only up until Sunday, so Sunday, August 27th. So it's just basically the first few days of Expedition 33, the first week of Oblivion. And actually, the numbers say that Expedition 33 has done 1.7 million players, 1.71 million players in that time. Oblivion is just under 6 million players. So we're looking at a sizable difference here, but there's a few caveats to this. I really want to stress we're not comparing Oblivion and Expedition 33. Oblivion is an established brand. You launch something like that, all the fans are going to come in, or a lot of the fans are going to come in. Expedition 33 is a new IP, so that will build over time. That number's more likely to go up and up and up faster than Oblivion's number. Oblivion also launched earlier, so you've got a bit of a longer play time here as well. So when we're talking about, I'm not comparing the two in terms of scale and size. At the moment, Oblivion has more players, but that's not surprising. But Expedition 33, I was interested in a few details about it. So 45% of Expedition 33 players are on Xbox. Not surprised. The majority of the games played on Xbox. Again, not surprising. It's on Game Pass. Compare that to Oblivion. 47% of Oblivion players are on Xbox. Now, Oblivion, as well as being is an Xbox game. Its history is sort of 360, so it's done quite well. But ultimately, those numbers are pretty similar. Both of them Game Pass games. 25% of Expedition 33 players are on Steam. That number is 34% for Oblivion. So 34% of Oblivion players are on Steam. So a big difference there. And again, Oblivion is sort of a Western RPG in the PC style. So again, not too surprising, really, that PC would do really well for Oblivion. And this is, again, not so surprising. 30% of Expedition 33 players are on PlayStation, whereas that number is just 19% for Oblivion. And again, Expedition 33, JRPG in the Final Fantasy style, it's very much a PlayStation audience. None of these numbers are particularly surprising, but it's very nice to see that. But ultimately, the majority of players are on Xbox, and that's because of Game Pass. Where I really wanted to delve into this is actually, did they hurt each other? I know that they're different RPGs. Matt points out they're different RPGs. One's a JRPG, one's a Western RPG. But when you're talking about a game that's, when you're trying to appeal broadly, it's still fantasy RPGs, right? So Ampere has crossover data. They share crossover data between one game and the next. 55% of people who played Expedition 33 on Xbox also played Oblivion. So over half of the audience on Xbox played both games. Expedition's audience played both games, which is really, I think that really speaks to the power of Game Pass, because Game Pass we talk about it is in negative and positive terms sometimes, but I think the fact is that people tried both as a result of that. If you compare that to PlayStation, only 16% of PlayStation Expedition 33 players also played Oblivion. So that number's a lot smaller. Obviously, there were premium titles on PlayStation and not in the subscription service. Numbers a bit higher on Steam. 22% of Steam Expedition 33 players also played Oblivion. But it's obviously well below the Game Pass impact. But that's the positive thing about Game Pass. People tried both. There was a big crossover there. Overall, by the way, it was a 35% crossover between Expedition 33 players and Oblivion players. 35% of Expedition 33 players also played Oblivion. So there was a big crossover there between those two audiences. But if you start looking at hours played, now this isn't just for those markets I named before, this is actually global numbers from Ampere. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 on PlayStation and Steam played around, on average, people paid that game for up until Sunday. Remember, this is just until Sunday. 4.4 hours on average people played Clair Obscur Expedition 33 on PlayStation and Steam. Slightly less on PlayStation, but it's very close. Xbox, 2.2 hours. And if you go to Oblivion, on Steam, Oblivion has been played on average, again, up until Sunday, 3.6 hours. On PlayStation, 3.8 hours. But Xbox, 2.2 hours. So that's the challenge of Game Pass, really represent. And again, none of this is surprising. We know that people with Game Pass will willingly give something a bit of a try. And if it's not for them, they'll drop it. And that is the challenge of Game Pass. But it's really, none of this data is surprising. But it's really nice to see it sort of laid out and really represented in these two games that came out side by side. People are going to jump from one game to the other if it's in the subscription service. They are going to play it for less. And they're more likely to drop out a lot quicker. But regardless, both games are being a big hit. I was worried that those two launching the same week was going to cause damage to them both. I think it possibly did. But I think people who were interested in Oblivion rushed in straight away to play it. And I think people are discovering Expedition 33 over time. There's an Expedition 33 movie. So what the numbers mean, James, is that two games, both of them RPGs, different types of RPGs, came out in the same week and both did extremely well.
And that is good. That's just really encouraging. Like, you're right. It's always awful to see two games come out on top of each other and is to the complete detriment of one.
Yeah, because we're of a certain age, I guess we remember the Blur split-second racing game.
Yeah, exactly where my head was going, yeah.
Where they both sort of annihilate each other. And sometimes one game wins over the other. If you remember, is it Battleborn and Overwatch? And was it Battleborn? It was something like that.
Battleborn, Battlecry. They're definitely a battle game there, yeah.
Yeah, and they went head-to-head with each other and one of them, just died because of that. And so it's always a risk. So I'm pleased that it's please do so well. I may have said August 27th earlier. It is, I obviously meant April 27th is the Sunday. Just if you're watching this in September for some reason, I'm referring to, we did this back in April. But yeah, very big success. It's been a busy week for game releases and it's going to get busier. So next month we've got Doom's a big title out next month. And in June, there's a new console launch of some description.
Some little handheld, some little gadget.
Yeah, something dropping in there. But it's busy throughout the whole summer. And I'm actually quite reassured. Well, I think I'll do a deeper dive into the market data in a couple of weeks' time. But I'm really reassured by things. Last year we were talking about how AAA games were dying and it was a problem. Star Wars Outlaws didn't do very well. Dragon Age didn't do very well. Final Fantasy didn't do very well. You've heard me say this on this podcast quite a few times in the last couple of weeks. But this year, Monster Hunter did really well. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 did really well. Assassin's Creed's done really well. Oblivion's done really well. Clair Obscur's done really well. Not everything's done very well, of course. Not everything can succeed, but there's a lot more positives at the moment, and hopefully that will continue. And Switch 2 seems to have sold out, and hopefully that will maintain as well.
Good start. 4 months into the year, and we've got, I think you listed there, 5 or 6 big hits. So yeah, that's a promising start.
Some of them have been breakout hits like Clair Obscur, but a lot of them have been they're doing the numbers you sort of expect them to do. But even that feels like a win. Assassin's Creed has done, what good Assassin's Creed games do. And I'm like, great. Yes. Because Star Wars Outlaws didn't, and Avengers didn't, and, not Avengers, sorry, Avatar didn't. And I think that's a win. To see RPGs doing really well shortly after Dragon Age sort of missed as well. And Final Fantasy missed last year as well. It's been a certainly busy start to the year, but success is being had. New IPs, established brands, remakes. I'm feeling really positive about the market at the moment. Obviously, there's the tariffs and the impact upon that, and there's the wider economic conditions, loads of things to be anxious about. But in terms of the data that we have for the first few months of the year, well, not the data so much. I think overall the markets, we did have Power World and Helldivers 2 last year, but I think looking at individual successes, I think there's certainly enough positives.
In a past life, this is usually where I'd just stop you talking and I'd rattle off all the kind of,
You don't have the course. How do I conclude this podcast, Chris?
I don't know how to do it. It's me hosting. It's like I don't know. I don't know all the the housekeeping stuff, do I?
Well, I'll take back over. Thank you, James, for being a literal guest host this week. And thank you, everyone, for listening and tuning in. The Game Business, we're back next week. We have a feature show, which is going to be quite exciting, featuring CD Projekt. We've also we have our news analysis show. We have some extra data there. And maybe even another returning member of the gamesindustry.biz team will be joining me on that show as well. James, I hope you'll come back at some point. Steve at Digital Banditos, thank you for lending us your James. Hopefully we can have you back at some point in the near future as well. And also stay tuned to thegamebusiness.com for news on our event. Hopefully it'll be soon. And if you want to make sure you don't miss a show, if you want to make sure that you catch all of the future episodes and any breaking news stories, sign up to thegamebusiness.com. It's free. You just need to go on the website, stick your email in, and you get all the stuff directly to your inbox. It's handy. Thank you all for tuning in.